was probably a kinesthetic learner when I was a kid. And I always felt as though the experience of my moving body was this remarkable source of pleasure and wonder and discovery. But I didn't feel as though there were very many places in my world where that was something that I could cultivate. And it wasn't until many years later, when I trained to be a psychotherapist, that I came across a field of psychotherapy called body psychotherapy, and sometimes called somatic psychology. And I realized that I didn't need to keep my love of the body and my fascination with the human psyche and who we are as a species and what makes us tick, that I didn't actually need to keep those two things separate anymore. The body is not, and our senses, our physical senses, are not these untrustworthy, infantile, unreliable, problematic things that are only good for carrying our head around, right? But in fact, our bodies are who we are, and that we lose a big part of who we are, and we lose a lot of the richness of life when we agree to allow that part of ourselves to be marginalized. There are really three areas of focus in my own research. The first is there is across many cultures and throughout history, this remarkable subjugation and denial of the lived, felt experience of the body, and that part of the task of addressing social inequities is actually a task for everyone, which is to find ways to come back into our own skins and be present and to occupy ourselves from the inside out. But beyond that, there's also this huge territory of body image and the degree to which members of socially subordinated and subjugated groups are made to believe that there is something inherently, irrevocably wrong and or bad about their bodies that they can do nothing about. The third territory that my research investigates has to do with our nonverbal communication. About 75% of all of our interpersonal communication, when we do it in person, happens on a body level. And it's not what we say, it's what our bodies are saying as we're speaking the words that we're speaking. And that when we're faced with a contradiction between what someone is speaking and what their body is saying, it's the body we believe. And so one of the implications for that in terms of social justice work is that if we don't interrogate the messages that our bodies are relaying to each other, whether the people that we're communicating with are members of social groups different from ours in salient ways, or whether there's a power imbalance, that those messages can really undermine or reinforce power inequities. And there's tons of really good research in nonverbal communication that suggests that if we want to undo macro-level systems of oppression, one of the important and fairly unrecognized dimensions of systemic oppression is the everyday micro-sociological body-to-body ways in which we reproduce those dynamics all the time. I think that there are two things going on, and it's going to be fascinating to discover how we mutate as a species on this one. Because although there does seem to be some early evidence that younger people seem to be willing to tolerate a much greater variety of bodily expression than ever before. On the other hand, we're also entering a world in which most of those young people spend a good chunk of their lives in a disembodied state because they're interacting with technology and interacting with one another in a very disembodied way. So I mean, in terms of like what's the cutting edge in our field, that's a territory, is the relationship between the psyche and the soma and perhaps the cyborg.